Hey, what's up everyone? It's Shamrock here with a boss guide for you. This is for Magmatusk, who is normally the first boss in Neltharus. So this boss has been quite tricky since its launch. I think one of the main reasons that it is so tough is that a lot of groups do it differently. You kind of start out with a plan and then it sort of goes sideways through like either a bad bait or someone dying or something like that. So really, I'm just going to go through a really successful run that I had on a 23 on a Tyrannical, and I'm going to show you what we did. I think it went really smooth. The plan sort of stayed together. Nobody died, and I was able to keep everyone alive using this talent build you see in front of you. So before going into the actual Magmatusk guide, I'm just going to quickly go over some of the talents that I feel are important for this build. So first on the left tree, I'm pretty much full talented into healing here. There's not a lot of utility, which is nice because it's not really needed for Neltharus on a Tyrannical week. The only really utility point that you need is improved Purify Spirit, and that is for the last boss. So in order to maximize healing, I have full Swirling Currents, I have full Surging Shields, I have Mana Spring just because that can get a little bit tough when you're healing so much, especially on a longer fight like Magmatusk. I have Totemic Surge, which reduces the cooldown of my totems. I have Totemic Focus, which increases the radius, which is actually really nice for Magmatusk because sometimes people get a little bit spread out. And yeah, so if you're going in here, this is one that I would use. I also have Graceful Spirit, which is once again nice for Magmatusk. It's nice for a lot of the fights in here as well as the dungeon itself. But this is going to allow your Spirit Walker's Grace ability to have a decreased cooldown by 30 seconds, and it increases your movement speed while active, which is really nice for Magmatusk. Something else that I would maybe consider doing that I just thought about now is in order to, so if you're healing Magmatusk and he looks at you for the charge and you don't have a lot of time to run out of the way, having Thunderous Pause is actually a great ability for that fight because it will allow you to move out of the way quicker, because it essentially increases your Ghost Wolf movement speed by 25% for the first 3 seconds. So if you ever find yourself in a tight spot with the Magmatusk charge, you can just go and do Ghost Wolf and get out of there real quick with this talent. If you were going to do this, what I would probably take away from is probably a point in Surging Shields. However, you could look at this, maybe Mana Spring if you're not having mana issues or anything like that. So yeah, with that being said, looking at the right side of the tree, I'm pretty much fully spec'd into healing here as well. If you're doing this key on a lower key, like maybe a 22 and lower, I don't think you need full points in Ancestral Vigor. I think you could go 1 point for the 5% health increase and then maybe put that extra point into Stormkeeper. But because this is a 23, anything that or higher, you're probably, as much as it pains me to say, going to want 2 points into Ancestral Vigor. But other than that, the only interesting thing about this build is I am playing Flow of the Tides as well as Continuous Waves. And the reason that's interesting is because not a lot of people combine those two playstyles, but I feel like for some dungeons, Neltharus being one of them, and a few others, if you've watched my other videos, I kind of talk about it, but I do feel that Flow of the Tides is great for Neltharus, mostly for the boss damage patterns as well as the trash damage patterns. Can be a little bit bursty, mainly for the Forge boss. So that boss I actually think is the hardest. I think it's harder than Magmatusk if you're able to have a group who can do the movement that is required by Magmatusk, and this really helps with the Forge boss and the damage patterns for that boss fight, which hopefully I'll have a guide up for that soon as well. So yeah, with that being said, let's jump into the actual fight itself. Okay, so Magmatusk, I find, like I said, I feel like, as far as I know, there's not like one single amazing way to do this fight. It kind of just depends on your group comp and how your tank positions it and where the baits happen, but I feel like the best way to do this fight, in theory, would be to ping-pong him between the two walls. Because he gets a big, huge damage increase, I think it's like 200% damage increase by standing in the fire, the tank does have to move him out of the fire, so and whenever he charges, he puts fire as well. He just kind of throws fire out randomly. So ping-ponging him between these two walls will allow your group to sort of stay grouped up. And I feel like that's the biggest mistake that people, individuals, and groups can make during this fight, is that you accidentally get kind of spread out, which is natural because the room is pretty big and ranged, naturally like to stand far away from the boss. It's easy to get split up from the group and find yourself away, and as a healer that's really tough because if people are too far away you can't heal them, especially as a shaman you can't really chain heal because it doesn't work as well. So you want to bait him just like we did there, basically back and forth, and that is going to maximize the amount of space that you have in the room. There's also the volatile mutation that he does throughout the fight. I believe that's what it's called. So that is going to be an AoE that increases in both intensity and the amount of time that it stays on the group throughout the fight. So this is probably the hardest part to deal with as a healer, because by the end of the fight it's like a 20-second dot that chunks you for like pretty much 50-60% of your health per tick, and it ticks every 5 seconds. So it's kind of like a marathon sort of dot where you really need to figure out how to heal through it. So I actually have a very specific set of cooldowns that I use to get through these volatile mutations. So for the first one I use Ancestral Guidance and Lust, sorry, and you should have Lust for this fight. And I don't actually need it to use Ancestral Guidance, but it's in order to have it up for when I need it later in the fight, I do need to pop it for that first one. It also means, and this is a little bit unorthodox, for the second one I don't use any cooldowns. I use my Racial because I have something like that. Maybe you can use a potion or something like an intellect pot to help you out. But my goal for the second one is to be able to heal through it using Flow of the Tides, using Continuous Waves and Primordial Wave, just using my regular kit with no major cooldowns. And the reason for that is, like I said, I want to be able to have my cooldowns up towards the end of the fight, and I use my cooldowns in a very specific order for this fight, and I find that I think I found like the nice way to get that to work, and so far it's worked on a 23. I'm hoping it would work on a 24. I may need to tweak it for a 25 depending on how much longer the fight would last. But anyways, order of cooldowns: first volatile mutation, use your Ancestral Guidance; second one, use nothing, and then for the third one you're going to want to pop Ascendance. Alright, and then using Ascendance, hopefully everyone is nice and close to be ordered to benefit from that increased AoE healing. And then you're just going to go once again ham with your AoE heals, using Flow of the Tides to the best of your ability, using Primordial Wave and Continuous Waves to the best of your ability. You'll see I have Spectre Shock's weak aura there beside my health frames, which basically it counts my undulation charges. So if you're using Primordial Wave, you want to Healing Wave on the second undulation charge, like the second count, and that will actually apply the undulation buff to all of your Primordial Wave cleaves. That's actually explained in some of my other videos as well, so big credit to Spectre Shock once again. Alright, so for this fourth volatile mutation, this is where stuff starts to get tricky. This is where I'm going to use Healing Tide. And then once again, in addition to Healing Tide, I'm going to be using all of my other kit. And I'm going to hope that that's enough to keep everyone alive. Your group needs to help you out here as well, though. So if they get the lava spray on them, they should be saving a cooldown for that. If they don't, and you can see who's targeted by it, that's your cue to heal them up. Try to make sure they're max HP when they get hit by that, because it does really start to hurt towards the end of the fight, in addition to having the volatile mutation dot as well. You're always going to want to make sure you have a cloudburst down for each of those volatile mutations, and that's going to help out too. So had this fight gone on any longer, which it does with a lot of groups, my next volatile mutation would have been Ancestral Guidance, and that's why I used it actually for that first one, is to have it up there again. And then I use Slink as well as Ancestral Guidance. Although for Slink, that's one of those ones where I use not always in the same spot. Like my cooldown order is pretty much for Ancestral Guidance, Ascendance, and Healing Tide. Slink is really just there in case things go wrong, or if it's towards the end of the fight and I haven't used it yet. And that can really help, especially with the lava spray. If you see someone's about to get hit by a lava spray and they don't have enough health to survive it, Slink is a great a great tool to use there. Also for that fight, don't forget about Astral Shift. That's your defensive that you should be using once again if you get lava spray, or if things just get a little bit hairy and you need to focus on healing somebody else. Spirit Walker's Grace, amazing talent for that fight, especially if you have to move out of the way of the charge or the fire that comes out of him after he charges. And also don't forget your health pot as well, as that is going to be essential for you, once again, surviving a lava spray in an event that you don't have a personal or something to use for it. The final thing I'll say is that during that fight, baiting the boss is very important. Once again, try to ping pong him back and forth, staying together as a group. Note that the fire on the ground doesn't do that much damage, so if you do need to stand in the fire for a second to bait him, you'll see I'm pretty sure I do it during that fight. It doesn't actually take you for that much. So just really main focus is setting out your cooldown order and then making sure you bait the boss, and hopefully your group is helping out with that. But yeah, once again, pretty chaotic fight. I think that's one of the hardest fights this season so far by far, and I'm actually surprised it took them as long as they did to nerf it. I feel like it could use another nerf. I personally don't like the idea of nerfs. I like having to get creative and trying to find a way around it. But that boss is actually really tough, especially if you have a group who is not helping you out and is not spreading out or using personals or using what they need to use. But yeah, so that's it. That was once again Magmatusk on a 23 Tyrannical with Volcanic and Sanguine as the affixes. Volcanic, unfortunately, as easy as it is, can make some bosses really hard on Tyrannical. Thankfully, that's not necessarily one of them. But yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this guide. I hope you helped you out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them, put them in, and I will respond to them if I can. And with that being said, I'll see you next time, and thank you.